The red sun cast long shadows across the rocky surface of Kepler 442b. This world had no name in human language, but the Zethkri called it Victory's Edge. It was fitting. For 3 months, General Vextar had watched his forces build the most advanced military base in this sector of space. The base stretched for miles across the barren landscape, filled with weapons that could destroy entire cities and ships that could travel between stars in days. Vextar stood on the observation deck of the main command tower. His 8-foot frame was covered in natural armor scales that gleamed like black metal. His yellow eyes could see across vast distances, and his clawed hands had torn through the armor of countless enemies. Behind him, dozens of officers worked at control stations, monitoring the activities of over 50,000 Zethkri soldiers stationed on this world. The general felt satisfied. This base would be the launching point for the hegemony's expansion into the Outer Rim territories. Soon, the resource-rich worlds in this region would belong to his people. The weak species that lived there would either serve the hegemony or be destroyed. A soft chime drew his attention. His communications officer, Major Kethver, approached with careful steps. The younger Zethkri kept his head low in respect. "General," Kethver said, "we have received a response from the human territories." Vextar's forked tongue tasted the air. Humans. The mammals had been quiet since the hegemony began its expansion. Intelligence reports suggested they were a young species, barely capable of space travel. They controlled only a few dozen star systems and had no real military power. "Show me," Vextar ordered. The main display screen activated, showing the space around their world. A single ship appeared on the sensors. It was small, clearly built for transport rather than war. The ship's design was simple and crude compared to hegemony vessels. "That is their response?" Vextar asked. His voice carried amusement. "One ship?" "Yes, General," Kethver replied. "The ship contains one life sign. Scans show it as a single human." Laughter erupted across the command center. Officers turned from their stations to stare at the screen. Some pointed at the tiny ship with their claws. Others shook their heads in disbelief. "One soldier!" Vextar roared with laughter. "The mammals send one soldier to face the might of the hegemony." Commander Zexinol Vextar, second in command, stepped forward. Her scales were scarred from many battles. "General, perhaps this is some kind of mistake. Maybe their communication systems are broken." "No mistake," Vextar said, studying the sensor readings. "Look at the ship's course. It is heading directly for our base. This human knows exactly where we are and what we have here." The laughter in the command center grew louder. Some officers began making jokes about human intelligence. Others suggested the lone human might be lost or confused. Vextar raised his clawed hand for silence. "Officers, consider what we face. We have 17 conquered star systems behind us. Our fleet numbers 3,000 ships. Our ground forces could conquer entire continents. And the humans, they send one soldier." "Perhaps they do not understand our power," suggested Major Kethver. "Their intelligence gathering must be very poor." "Or," said Commander Zexinol, "they are surrendering." One representative to offer their submission. Vextar nodded slowly. "Either way, it shows how pathetic they are. Do they think one mammal can negotiate with the hegemony? Do they believe we will show mercy because they send so few?" The general walked to the tactical display that showed their base's defenses. Thousands of weapons pointed toward the sky. Energy barriers protected every important structure. Elite shock troops patrolled every sector. This base could hold off an attack from 100 enemy ships. "This will be educational," Vextar said. "Our enemies need to understand what happens when they challenge the hegemony. When word spreads that humans send only one soldier to face us, every species in this sector will know their weakness." Should we destroy the ship now? Asked Commander Zexanol. No, Vexstar replied. Let the human land. Let them see our power up close. When they realize how hopeless their situation is, we will record their fear and surrender. This recording will be useful when we demand the submission of other worlds. The human ship requested permission to land at the base's main platform. Vexstar granted it personally. He wanted to see this foolish human with his own eyes. Gather the command staff, he ordered. All senior officers will witness this meeting. I want everyone to see how pathetic human resistance truly is. As the officers prepared for the humans' arrival, Vexstar reviewed what he knew about the species. Humans were smaller and weaker than Zethkri. They had no natural armor or claws. Their lifespans were short, and their technology was hundreds of years behind hegemony standards. Most importantly, they had never conquered another species. They seemed to prefer trade and diplomacy over proper military expansion. Weak, Vexstar muttered. Completely weak. The human ship landed with a soft thud on the platform outside the main building. Vexstar watched through the cameras as a single figure emerged. The human was smaller than he expected, wearing simple military clothes. No visible weapons. No armor. No escort. Look at that, laughed Commander Zexanol. It is even smaller than our report suggested. And it appears to be female, noted Major Kethver. They send a female to negotiate with warriors. Vexstar's amusement grew. In Zethkri society, females were warriors just like males, but he knew many species kept their females away from combat. If humans were so desperate that they sent a female soldier alone, their situation was even worse than he thought. This will be the shortest diplomatic meeting in hegemony history, Vexstar declared. Prepare the Great Hall. I want this human to see the full power of our forces before we crush their pathetic resistance forever. The Great Hall of the Zethkri base was built to intimidate. Massive pillars rose toward a ceiling that disappeared into shadows. Weapon displays covered the walls, showing energy rifles, plasma cannons, and blade weapons from dozens of conquered worlds. The floor was made of polished black stone that reflected the red lighting, making it look like a pool of blood. General Vexstar sat on a raised platform at the far end of the hall. His command throne was carved from the bone of some great creature, and energy fields around it hummed with deadly power. To his left and right stood his senior officers, each one a veteran of many battles. Their scales bore scars and markings that told stories of conquest and victory dot around the edges of the hall. Elite shock troops stood at attention. Each warrior was armed with weapons that could cut through steel. Their armor gleamed with built-in shields and targeting systems. There were 50 of them in sight, and sensors showed hundreds more throughout the base. The main doors opened with a deep grinding sound. All eyes turned toward the entrance as the human entered the hall. Staff. Sergeant Maria Santos walked into the great hall with steady steps. She was smaller than every creature in the room, standing barely over 5.5 feet tall. Smaller than every creature in the room, standing barely over 5.5 feet tall. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple style, and her dark eyes moved calmly across the assembled aliens. She wore a clean military uniform with simple rank markings and carried only a standard datapad. Vexstar watched her approach with growing amusement. She looked so small and fragile compared to his warriors. Her steps echoed in the vast hall, the only sound in the complete silence that had fallen over the assembled Zethkri. Stop there, human, Vexstar commanded when she reached the center of the hall. Santos stopped exactly where he indicated. She stood with her feet slightly apart, hands at her sides, looking directly at the general without any sign of fear or nervousness. I am General Vexstar, Supreme Commander of the Hegemony forces in this sector, he announced. His voice boomed across the hall. You stand in the presence of warriors who have conquered 17 star systems. Behind me are officers who have crushed the resistance of countless worlds. Around you are soldiers who have never known defeat. Santos nodded once. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, Earth Defense Force, she replied. Her voice was calm and clear. Earth Defense Force, Vextar repeated, tasting the words. Tell me, Sergeant Santos, does your species not understand the situation? Do you not realize what you face here? We understand perfectly, General, Santos said. Vextar leaned forward in his throne. Then explain to me why your people sent only one soldier. We expected a fleet, an army, some show of military strength. Instead, you arrive alone, with no weapons, no armor, no support. He gestured toward his assembled forces. Do humans not comprehend the concept of warfare? Santos looked around the hall, taking in the weapons, the soldiers, the displays of power. When her eyes returned to Vextar, she seemed completely unimpressed. We understand warfare very well, General. Perhaps better than you realize. Laughter erupted from the assembled officers. Commander Zexanal stepped forward. You understand warfare? Human, your entire species controls fewer worlds than we conquered last year alone. Your ships are primitive. Your weapons are weak. What could you possibly know about real war? We know that real strength isn't always about numbers, Santos replied. Vextar raised his hand for silence. This human's confidence was beginning to irritate him. Numbers, technology, superior genetics, these things matter in war. What you call strength, we call delusion. Then let me deliver Earth's message, Santos said. She activated her datapad and read from it. The Terran government acknowledges the hegemony's expansion into the Outer Rim territories. However, we cannot allow your forces to claim the systems of Proxima, Wolf 359, or Kepler 438. These worlds are under Earth's protection. The hall erupted in laughter again, louder this time. Several officers pointed their claws at Santos and made mock threats. The shock troops shifted their weapons meaningfully. Vextar let the laughter continue for nearly a minute before calling for quiet. Under Earth's protection, he repeated. Human, let me explain reality to you. We will claim those worlds because we have the power to take them. Your pathetic species cannot stop us. He stood from his throne and walked down to the main floor, towering over Santos. I will give you this one chance to save your people from complete destruction. You have 72 hours to evacuate all human presence from the 3 systems I mentioned. Remove your colonies, your ships, your monitoring stations, everything. Santos looked up at him without flinching. And if we refuse? Then we will demonstrate why the hegemony has never failed to claim what it desires, Vextar said. Our battle fleet will arrive at your worlds. Our weapons will turn your cities to glass. Your ships will burn in space. Your people will serve us or join the void. I see, Santos said. She made a note on her datapad. General, before I respond to your ultimatum, may I ask you something? Vextar was surprised by her continued calm. Most species became terrified when faced with hegemony power. This human seemed completely unaffected by his threats. Ask your question, he said. You've conquered 17 star systems. You have thousands of ships and millions of soldiers. You've defeated every enemy you've faced. Santos paused. Has any species ever sent just one representative to negotiate with you? The question caught Vextar off guard. He thought for a moment. No. Every species we've encountered sent fleets, armies, delegations of hundreds. They tried to match our strength with numbers. And how did those meetings end? With their surrender or destruction, Vextar replied proudly. Santos nodded. So every species you fought used the same approach. overwhelming force, large numbers, intimidation displays. And every one of them lost. Yes, Vextar said, though he was beginning to wonder where this conversation was heading. General, Santos said, may I demonstrate why Earth sent only one soldier? The question was so unexpected that Vextar almost laughed. This small, unarmed human wanted to demonstrate something to him? In his own stronghold, surrounded by his elite forces? You wish to demonstrate human military capabilities? He asked. I wish to demonstrate why your previous experience with other species might not apply to humans, Santos replied. Vextar looked around at his officers. They were all watching with interest. Some seemed amused, others looked confused. Commander Zexanol shrugged, indicating she saw no harm in allowing this human to embarrass herself further. Very well, Vextar said. Show me what one human soldier can do against the might of the hegemony. The combat arena was located deep within the Zethkri base. It was a circular space the size of a small stadium, with walls of reinforced metal rising 30 feet high. Observation decks surrounded the arena, filled with hundreds of Zethkri soldiers who had come to watch the entertainment. General Vextar took his place in the command booth, overlooking the arena floor. His officers stood beside him, while screens showed different camera angles of the combat space below. The arena floor was bare metal with scattered obstacles, broken pillars, metal barriers, and debris from previous battles. This is our standard combat trial, Vextar explained to Santos, who stood beside him looking down at the arena. It is used to test the fighting ability of captured enemies. The rules are simple. Survive for 10 minutes against 3 of our warriors. Santos nodded. What weapons will I be given? Weapons? Commander Zexanol laughed. Inferior species receive no weapons. You will face our warriors with whatever you can find in the arena. I see, Santos said calmly. And your warriors will be fully armed? Of course, Vextar replied. They will carry standard energy rifles and blade weapons. This is meant to be a test, not a fair fight. Santos looked around the observation deck at the assembled aliens. Every single one of them was larger and stronger than her. Their natural armor and claws made them dangerous even without weapons. With energy weapons, they would seem unstoppable. Before we begin, Vextar said, I want you to understand what you face. Each of these warriors has killed dozens of enemies. They have trained since childhood for combat. They know no mercy and feel no fear. 3 Zethkri warriors entered the arena through a side door. Each stood over 8 feet tall, their black scales gleaming under the bright lights. They carried energy rifles that hummed with deadly power. Long curved blades hung at their sides. They moved with the fluid grace of natural predators. The crowd in the observation decks cheered as the warriors took their positions. Betting began among the soldiers about how quickly the human would fall. Most bets were for less than 30 seconds. Last chance to surrender, human, Vextar said. Admit your species' weakness, and I will make your death quick. Santa shook her head. Thank you, General, but I'll proceed with the demonstration. A lift platform lowered Santos to the arena floor. She stood in the center of the space, looking around at the scattered debris and obstacles. The 3 Zethkri warriors spread out to surround her, their weapons ready. Begin, Vextar commanded. The first warrior raised his energy rifle, aiming directly at Santos. The crowd expected to see her vaporized immediately. Instead, something impossible happened. Santos was no longer where she had been standing. She had moved the instant the trial began, diving behind a broken pillar just as the energy blast scorched the metal where she had stood. But she didn't stay hidden. Before the warrior could fire again, she was moving to another piece of cover. Fast reflexes, Commander Zexanol observed. But it will only delay the inevitable. The second warrior tried to flank Santos, moving to cut off her escape route. As he rounded a metal barrier, she was waiting for him. But instead of retreating, she did something that shocked every observer. She attacked. Santos grabbed a piece of metal debris and hurled it at the warrior's weapon. The throw was perfectly aimed, striking the energy rifle and sending it flying. Before the warrior could react, Santos was moving again. The third warrior fired at her new position, but she was already elsewhere. She seemed to predict where the energy blasts would strike before they were fired, always staying one step ahead of their aim. How is she moving so fast? Major Kethver asked. Humans are supposed to be slow and weak. She must be enhanced somehow, Vexenal replied, but she sounded uncertain. On the arena floor, Santos had found a length of metal pipe. It was crude compared to Zethkri weapons, but she wielded it with surprising skill. When the first warrior drew his blade weapon and charged her, she didn't flee. She stood her ground. The warrior swung his blade in a killing arc. Santos deflected it with the pipe, using the alien's own momentum to throw him off balance. Before he could recover, she struck him in a precise spot behind his neck. The warrior collapsed, unconscious. The crowd fell silent. Impossible, Vexstar whispered. That warrior has never been defeated in single combat. The remaining two warriors attacked together, trying to overwhelm Santos with coordinated strikes. But coordination required communication, and communication took time. Santos seemed to exploit every tiny delay, every moment of hesitation. She ducked under one blade strike and used her momentum to sweep the legs of the second warrior. As he fell, she disarmed him and turned his own weapon against his partner. The fight had become two armed opponents against one human with improvised weapons. It should have been hopeless for Santos. Instead, she was winning. Watch her eyes, Commander Vexenal said suddenly. She's not just reacting. She's analyzing everything. It was true. Santos moved with a calculating precision that was disturbing to watch. She seemed to process every detail of her environment instantly. The weight of her weapons, the balance of her opponents, the layout of the arena obstacles. When one warrior tried to corner her against a wall, she used the wall itself as a weapon, pushing off it to gain momentum for a strike. When the other attempted to use his reach advantage, she closed the distance so quickly that his weapon became a liability in close quarters. 6 minutes into the trial, the second warrior fell unconscious. Santos stood over him, breathing steadily but showing no signs of exhaustion. The final warrior backed away from her, his confidence shaken. He raised his energy rifle with trembling claws. Finish her! Vexstar roared, but his voice cracked with uncertainty. The warrior fired repeatedly, filling the arena with energy blasts. Santos moved between the shots like she was dancing, never staying in one place for more than a heartbeat. She closed the distance step by step, using the obstacles as shields and deflections. When she reached the final warrior, the fight was over in seconds. She disarmed him with a move too fast for the cameras to follow clearly, then struck him unconscious with the same precision she had used on the others. Santos stood alone in the center of the arena. All three Zethkri warriors lay unconscious around her. The improvised weapons in her hands were bent and damaged, but she appeared completely unharmed. The observation deck was silent except for the hum of electronics. Santos looked up at General Vexstar. Should I demonstrate our defensive capabilities now, General? Vexstar stared down at her, his mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. This small, supposedly weak human had defeated 3 elite Zethkri warriors without breaking a sweat. She had done it with scrap metal and tactics he had never seen before. How? He managed to ask. Santos smiled for the first time since entering the base. It was not a pleasant expression. General, she said, would you like to know why Earth really sent only one soldier? The lift platform brought Santos back to the observation deck. Every Zethkri in the area stared at her with a mixture of confusion and something that might have been fear. The silence stretched on as General Vextar tried to understand what he had just witnessed. "Explain," he finally said. "Explain how one human defeated 3 of our finest warriors." Santos set down the bent metal pipe she had carried up from the arena. "General, you asked the wrong question. You should ask why your finest warriors lost to an average human soldier." "Average?" Commander Zexenal stepped forward, her claws extended. "You claim that was average performance?" "I'm a logistics specialist, actually," Santos replied. "I handle supply coordination and equipment distribution. Combat training is something every human receives, but it's not my specialty." The assembled officers looked at each other with growing alarm. If this human was not even a dedicated warrior, what would their actual soldiers be capable of? Vextar gestured toward the arena where medical teams were reviving his unconscious warriors. "Those 3 soldiers have each killed hundreds of enemies. They have conquered planets. How did a logistics specialist defeat them?" "Because you measure strength wrong," Santos said. She walked to the tactical display screen that showed the base layout. "You count numbers, technology, and physical power. You assume that bigger and stronger always wins." She pointed to different sections of the base on the screen. "But tell me, General, who designed this base?" "Our finest military engineers," Vextar replied proudly. "And they built it to withstand attacks from enemy fleets, correct?" "Of course. Nothing can penetrate our defenses." Santos smiled again. "Your main power generators are centrally located with no backup systems. Your ammunition storage is adjacent to your fuel depot. Your communication array has no redundant channels. Your water recycling system has a single point of failure that would affect the entire base." She turned to face the increasingly uncomfortable officers. "In 17 minutes of walking through your halls, I identified 34 critical vulnerabilities that could disable this entire facility. Your engineers built impressive weapons, but they forgot that wars are won by logistics, not just firepower." Major Kethver looked at his tactical readout. "Impossible. Our systems are state-of-the-art. Your systems are designed by a species that's never lost," Santos continued. "You don't plan for defeat because you've never experienced it. Every backup plan assumes your primary strategy will succeed. Every defense assumes your enemies will attack the way you expect them to." She walked back to stand directly in front of General Vextar. "But humans learn to fight by being the smaller, weaker species on our world. Every predator was bigger than us. Every prey animal was faster. We survived by learning to think differently." "What do you mean?" Vextar asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. "On Earth, humans were never the strongest hunters. We were persistence predators. We would chase prey animals for days, never giving up until they collapsed from exhaustion. We learned to use tools because we couldn't rely on claws and teeth. We learned to work together because alone, we were helpless." Santos activated her datapad and showed them an image of Earth. "Our entire planet taught us that victory goes to the species that adapts fastest, not the one that hits hardest. Every human child grows up learning to overcome larger, stronger opponents." Commander Zexenal studied the image. "Your world looks peaceful. There are no signs of the constant warfare that produces true warriors." "You're looking at it wrong again," Santos replied. "We don't fight each other anymore because we learned something your species hasn't. Cooperation is more powerful than conquest." She changed the display to show star charts. "The 3 systems you want to claim? They're not human colonies. They belong to 3 different alien species that asked for our protection. We don't conquer other worlds, General. We defend them." "Defend them with what?" Vextar demanded. "You have no massive fleets, no planet-killing weapons, no armies that match ours in size. We have something you've never faced, Santos said quietly. We have a species that refuses to surrender. She activated another display, showing ship movements in the contested systems. While you were building this base and preparing for conquest, we were building alliances. The species you plan to conquer have been sharing intelligence with us for months. We know the location of every hegemony ship, base, and supply depot in this sector. Vextar felt a cold sensation in his chest. You're saying you've been spying on us? I'm saying we've been preparing, Santos corrected. But not for the kind of war you're expecting. She pointed to different locations on the star chart. Your supply lines stretch across 17 systems. Every one of them depends on automated cargo ships following predictable routes. Your conquered worlds rely on hegemony technology they don't fully understand. Your entire empire is built on the assumption that overwhelming force is the only strategy that matters. Our empire has never failed, Commander Zexanal said. But her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Because you've never fought a species like humans, Santos replied. Every enemy you faced tried to match your strength with strength. They built bigger fleets, larger armies, more powerful weapons. And they all failed because they were fighting on your terms. She turned back to Vextar. But humans learned long ago that when you can't win by being stronger, you win by being smarter. When you can't destroy your enemy's strength, you target their weaknesses. You're threatening us, Vextar said. I'm explaining why your ultimatum is pointless, Santos corrected. You can bring your fleets to the contested systems. You can attack our allies' worlds. You can even attack Earth itself. She paused and looked around at the assembled officers. But if you do, you won't be fighting a war of conquest. You'll be fighting a war of survival. And humans have been very good at survival for a very long time. One human defeated 3 of our warriors, Major Kethver said slowly. And she claims to be average. Every human learns to fight opponents who are bigger and stronger, Santos confirmed. It's how we survived on our world. It's how we've survived every challenge since then. She walked to the window overlooking the base. Thousands of Zethkri soldiers moved between the buildings, weapons, and vehicles everywhere. It was an impressive display of military power. General, she said, how many of your soldiers have ever fought an enemy they couldn't see coming? How many have dealt with opponents who attack their weaknesses instead of challenging their strengths? How many have faced an enemy that turns their own advantages against them? Vextar didn't answer. He was beginning to understand that everything he thought he knew about warfare might be wrong. You sent thousands of soldiers to this world because you believe numbers equal victory, Santos continued. We sent 1 because we wanted to understand your thinking before we decide how to respond. She turned from the window to face him directly. Now I understand. You're not evil, General. You're just a hammer looking at every problem like it's a nail. But humans learned a long time ago that some problems require different tools. General Vextar stood in his command center, but everything felt different now. The weapons displays that had seemed so impressive an hour ago now looked like expensive tools designed to solve the wrong problems. His elite officers, who had been confident in their superiority, now glanced nervously at the small human, who had shattered their understanding of warfare. Santos pulled up another display on her datapad, showing detailed schematics that made several officers step back in alarm. How did you get those plans? Commander Zexanal demanded. Those are classified hegemony designs. Your security is designed to stop armies, not individuals, Santos replied calmly. While your sensors watch for fleets and your guards watch for attacks, I walked through your base and recorded everything I needed. Major Kethver checked his internal security scanners. Impossible. Our systems show no unauthorized access. Because I didn't try to access your systems, Santos explained. I observed, listened, and analyzed. Your soldiers talk freely about their duties. Your officers discuss operations in open areas. Your equipment has visible model numbers and specifications. She highlighted different sections of the base plans. I now know your patrol schedules, your response protocols, your command structure, and your resource requirements. All from simple observation. Vextar felt something he had never experienced before. The cold fear of being completely outmaneuvered. What do you want, human? I want to prevent a war that would be devastating for both our species, Santos said. General, you have 3 choices. First, you can proceed with your ultimatum and attack the contested systems. And if we do? Vextar asked. Then every hegemony ship, base, and supply line in this sector becomes a target. Not for massive fleets or armies, but for small groups of humans who specialize in making large systems stop working. Santos showed them another display. Star charts with red marks indicating hegemony positions. Your empire depends on complex logistics. Fuel shipments, equipment deliveries, communication networks. Humans excel at disrupting systems like that. You would attack civilian targets, Commander Zexnall accused. We would target military infrastructure, Santos corrected. But when your conquered worlds lose power, communication, and supply shipments, how long before they start wondering why they accepted hegemony rule? The officers looked at each other with growing concern. Their empire was built on the idea that resistance was hopeless. But if humans could make hegemony technology unreliable, that foundation would crumble. Your second choice, Santos continued, is to try to eliminate the human threat directly. Attack Earth and our colonies. Our fleets could destroy your entire species, Vextar said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Santos agreed. But it would cost you everything. Earth's defense fleet isn't designed to fight your ships in direct combat. It's designed to make sure that attacking us is more expensive than leaving us alone. She showed them new images. Human ships that look nothing like traditional warships. Every human vessel can operate independently for years. Every colony is self-sufficient. Every citizen knows how to survive without central support. What does that mean? Major Keffer asked. It means you can't defeat us by destroying our centers of power, because we don't have any, Santos explained. You can't force our surrender by threatening our worlds, because every world is prepared to stand alone. You can't break our supply lines, because we build redundancy into everything. Vextar studied the images with growing dread. You're saying we would have to hunt down every human individually. Across dozens of star systems, yes. And while you're spending years trying to eliminate scattered human populations, what happens to your empire? How do you maintain control over your conquered worlds when your entire military is chasing ghosts? The command center fell silent as the implications became clear. A war with humans wouldn't be a quick conquest followed by integration into the hegemony. It would be a grinding conflict that could destroy both species. What is your third choice? Vextar asked quietly. Santos put away her datapad and looked directly at him. Cooperation. Mutual non-aggression. Technology exchange. Trade agreements. You would trust us after we threatened your people? Commander Zexenol asked. We would verify, Santos replied. Trust is something that develops over time. But cooperation benefits both our species immediately. She activated one more display, showing star charts of unexplored regions. General, your species is powerful and organized. You've built an impressive empire. But you've only expanded into areas where you can overwhelm the local inhabitants. What are you suggesting? Vextar asked. There are entire regions of space that contain no intelligent life but vast resources. Worlds that could support Zethkri colonies without requiring conquest. Systems with rare materials that both our species could use. Santos highlighted several areas on the map. Humans excel at finding solutions to difficult problems. Zethkri excel at implementing those solutions on a large scale. Together, we could expand into regions that neither species could develop alone. And if we refuse cooperation? Major Cathver asked. Then you continue on your current path, Santos said. You spend your resources conquering species that resist you, governing populations that don't want you there, and eventually facing other enemies who learn to fight the way humans do. She looked around the command center one more time. Or you learned something that took humans thousands of years to figure out. That real strength comes from building things together, not tearing them apart. Vextar walked to the window overlooking his base. Thousands of soldiers moved through the facility, preparing for conquests that suddenly seemed pointless. For the first time in his military career, he was considering retreat from a position of strength. Why are you offering us this choice? He asked. You could have simply refused our demands and let us discover your capabilities the hard way. Santos joined him at the window. Because we learned something else on our world, General. The strongest warriors are those who never need to fight. She pointed toward the arena where Zethkri medics were still treating the unconscious warriors. Your soldiers down there are brave and skilled, but they were taught that victory means defeating enemies. Human soldiers are taught that victory means not having enemies in the first place. Vextar looked at her reflection in the window glass. This small, unremarkable human had walked into his stronghold alone and fundamentally changed his understanding of power. If we agree to your proposal, he said slowly, what guarantee do we have that humans won't turn their abilities against us later? Santos smiled, and this time it was genuinely warm. General, if we wanted to destroy the hegemony, we would never have revealed our capabilities to you. The truth of that statement hit him like a physical blow. Humans could have let the hegemony proceed with their expansion, learning their weaknesses during the conflict, and then systematically dismantled their empire. Instead, they had sent a single representative to offer an alternative. You're showing us mercy, Vextar realized. We're showing you a better path, Santos corrected. The choice is still yours to make. Vextar turned from the window to face his assembled officers. They looked to him for guidance, but he could see that their confidence in hegemony supremacy had been shaken. They had learned today that there were different kinds of strength, and that their species had only mastered one. Staff Sergeant Santos, he said formally, I will need to consult with the hegemony high command before accepting your proposal. Of course, General. How long will you need? 72 hours, Vextar replied, unconsciously echoing his own ultimatum. Santos nodded. I'll remain on your world until then, if that's acceptable. As she prepared to leave the command center, Vextar had one final question. Human, if your species is so committed to peace, why do you maintain a military at all? Santos paused at the doorway. Because we learned that the best way to avoid a fight is to make sure everyone knows you can win it. 6 months later, the Zethkri hegemony signed their first voluntary alliance treaty with another species. General Vextar, now serving as the hegemony's chief of strategic planning, often reflected on the day a single human soldier taught an entire empire that true power lay not in conquest, but in the wisdom to choose when not to use it.